Hi, I'm Elizabeth at A Literary Princess, and today I'm doing the Modern Classics book tag. This tag was created by Milena Reads. She recently did her 1-year update on it, which I saw, and I thought this was such a great tag, and I decided to do it because I talk a lot about Victorian classics and 19th century and even some 18th century, maybe early 20th, but I don't really talk a whole lot about modern classics on here, but I do read them. So I thought this would be fun. There's 9 prompts. Let's jump right in. Prompt number 1, what is the definition of a modern classic to you? That's so hard. That is so hard. So a classic is usually considered a book that was written 100 years ago or more, and particularly one that has made a big impact on literature and culture. So I kind of consider modern classics to be books that were published less than 100 years ago, but that still have made a big impact on literature and culture. And there's always like such a, is it or isn't it modern, or is it just a classic? It's kind of hard. It's really hard. My general, for me personally, I'm like, if my grandparents were alive and a functioning human being that had a consciousness and could talk when the book was published, it's a modern classic. And if it was before that point, it's just a classic. But that's very subjective. It's a very subjective question, I think, because I know there are people who consider like Virginia Woolf and James Joyce modern classics, whereas I tend to see them more as just classics. So I don't know, it's kind of hard. There's a lot of I don't know, especially like from the 20s to the 40s is kind of the period that's foggy. Anything after the 40s, I can confidently say, yes, it's a modern classic. And anything after the 20s, I can definitely say it's just a classic. But the time period in between there is where it gets kind of murky for me. So I don't know. I'd be very interested to hear everybody else's opinions down in the comments though. Question number 2, what is your favorite subgenre? Gothic, romantic, historical fiction, political, etc. So I just adore Gothic literature in general. So of course my favorite modern classic subgenre is Gothic. I have Rebecca here as my example. I hate this cover so much. I need a different copy. I hate it. Are there even words for this cover? There's no words for this cover. It's horrible. It looks like a cheap romance, Harlequin. Not that there's anything wrong with those. If you read those, that is fine, but that is not what this book is. Anyway, I love me a good creepy house with a claustrophobic atmosphere and kind of a mystery. Maybe we've got a dead person haunting us, literally or metaphorically, either one. I'm good with it. My jam. I love it. Question number 3, an author from the 20th century whose book you would recommend. We're going to continue on the Gothic kick. I would recommend We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. This is my favorite modern classic ever. It's one of my favorite books ever, honestly. This is so good. It deals with the narrator, Mary Cat, who lives with her sister, Constance, and their disabled uncle. Their family was all killed by arsenic poisoning, and everyone thinks that Constance did it, but she was acquitted. And so now they just kind of live in their house and they mind their business, and they're very in their routine, and everybody down in the town hates them or is scared of them. And then their cousin shows up to stay one day and it throws everything out. This is so good. Mary Cat is one of my favorite characters in literature. She's such a great narrator. She's an unreliable narrator, if you're wondering. Love me a good unreliable narrator. The atmosphere in this is just amazing. Jackson is a beautiful writer. Seriously, if you haven't picked this up, go pick this up. It's so good. And we'll just put that under Rebecca, even though Rebecca was the prompt before this, because it's stupid and stubby. All right, number 4, your favorite modern classic so far this year. Well, this was both a very easy question and a very hard question because I have only read one modern classic this year, but I didn't really like it. So, can it be called a favorite? I don't know, but it's the only one. This is The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir. This is a foundational piece of feminist theory, deals with the Western notion of women and how it has been constructed and what it means. There's some great parts of this. There's some not so great parts of this. I think it too much Freudian theory for me. I hate Freud. I think I've said this before. I think I said this when I was wrapping this book up, but there were some great parts. There were some not great parts. It was also 800 pages, so that was a thing. But it's the only modern classic I read, so by default it is both my least favorite and my most favorite. And everything's just gonna go under Rebecca. All right, number 5, what is a modern classic that surprised you? And so I actually have a physical copy of this book, but I just lent it to my mother literally on Saturday, and I am filming this on Monday, so I'm gonna have to put it up here. This is Nervous Conditions by Tsitsi Dangaranga, whose name I always just butcher, and I feel so bad. I feel so terrible. But this book is amazing. It is a piece of African literature from Zimbabwe. It's considered a classic in African literature. It follows a young girl named Tambu as she goes to school and gets an education. I had no expectations for this book. I'd never heard of it. It was for a class, for my feminist theory class, the only novel we were reading. And so I was just like, okay, I picked it up. And it became, I think it was my second favorite book of the year. It's so good. The writing is gorgeous. The story is heartbreaking and just wonderful. And go pick this up. Oh, it's so good. It utterly surprised me. I did not expect to love it this much. Number 6, a modern classic that was disappointing. This was another one for the feminist theory class. This is Gender Trouble by Judith Butler. This was published in 1990. It is another foundational piece of feminist theory, considered a classic. There are great ideas in here, I will give it that, but Judith Butler's writing is so dense, like painfully dense. I can't focus on it at all. Like I was reading things and just like, I was like, these sentences are English, but I'm not comprehending it. So ultimately, I just found it disappointing because it was so difficult to understand it. And I like being able to understand the things that I read. All right, number 7, a modern classic that you want to reread. Going back to the Gothic, The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. This was my second Shirley Jackson novel. I think it might be her first, though, actually. Is it her first one? No, maybe Hangs a Man is. I have no idea. I'll stop trying to pretend that I know because I don't know. But this is amazing. It's very different from the Netflix series, if you've seen that. The Netflix series more kind of takes the idea of it and some of the names of characters and completely changes it around. So don't go in expecting the Netflix series. But like I said, Shirley Jackson is just a master of atmosphere. This is such a haunting book, haha, because it's The Haunting of Hill House. It's so unsettling. Again, the claustrophobic feel, the big creepy house. I've only read it once, so I really do want to reread it again so that I can, because I know there's going to be things that I missed the first time. This is the type of book, there's so much there, even though it's so short. You can get something new every time you read it. And I know that I'm going to get something new out of it. And I can't wait to actually have time to do that. Because I certainly don't now. Number 8, a recent release that you think will be a modern classic in a few decades. Define recent, because the book I have for this came out in 2009, technically. That's recent, right? But to be fair, the English translation just came out in 2019. This is Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Takarchak. I think I'm pronouncing her name right. Again, I can't pronounce anyone's name right. We all know this by now. Anyway, so this actually won the Nobel Peace Prize for Literature, which is one of the reasons why I think it will be considered a modern classic. It follows Janina, a woman living in a Polish village, who is considered kind of crazy by her neighbors. And when people start showing up murdered, she thinks that the animals are taking revenge and killing people. And she starts investigating it. So I guess you can probably see why some people might think she is crazy. But oh my word, the writing in this book. Stunning. I'm also prompt to the translator, who is Antonia Lloyd-Jones, who did an excellent job. There is so much here that can be analyzed, that can be taught in schools, and that's why I think this is going to be a modern classic. There's environmental things, animal rights, morality, but there's also astrology and the poetry of William Blake. And then I'm pretty sure there's some religious stuff, if I'm remembering correctly. It's been a few years. I read this in 2020. So there is just so much here. It is so beautifully written and just such a, oh my God. How do you even describe it? I don't know. It's just amazing. It's so good. So I really think this could become a modern classic. All right. And finally, number 9, what is the next modern classic on your TBR? And more feminist theory. This is The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan. Another foundational piece of feminist theory published in 1963. I mean, the back even says landmark, groundbreaking, classic. These adjectives barely do justice to the pioneering vision and lasting impact of the feminine mystique. So, yeah, whoever wrote the back of this book thinks that it's a classic, and at 1963 it fits my criteria for modern classic. I don't really know what it's about though, other than feminism. Like, I don't know what Betty Friedan is doing in here because I've not read it. But I'm reading this for my feminist theory exam list. And it's not next up on my reading list, but it's second to next up. I'm reading a classic first, A Vindication of the Rights of Women by Mary Wollstonecraft. So we'll see how that goes. That doesn't look very pretty, but oh well. Rebecca really screwed up my stack there by being the first book I had. Oh well. All right, so that is the Modern Classics book tag. If you want to do this, please consider yourself tagged by me. It has been great chatting with you all. I will see you soon. Bye.